Anyways, yeah, I'm not some kind of crazy jazz master, so if you thought that sucked, you know, I guess you could just stop watching the video like a lot of people do, because, you know, and I hate those videos where like people like start doing the lesson before they even show you what they're teaching you to play or anything like that, and I'm just like, how do I even know if this guy doesn't suck dick? So yeah, if you thought nothing of that was interesting, you don't want to learn anything about what I'm going to tell you, then yeah, leave now. But if not, if you just want some cool things that I figured out along my way trying to get a lot of jazz stuff going, keep watching, because you know, chances are I'm no better at jazz than whoever's watching this right now, but I found a lot of cool things that like work, like really, like it made everything a lot more clear for me. And like a couple of the things is, you know, like just a review of something you probably may or may not already know, you know, jazz, you know, a really popular jazz progression is 2-5-1. Or you mix it up. Mix up a lot of that shit, but mix up a lot of stuff, you know. I mean, that's what jazz isn't just 2-5-1s, you know, with the same bullshit that a lot of people think it is. But yeah, first chord C. I'm playing over a C major 2-5-1. That's what that is. Basically what I'm doing mostly is I'm following the chords, like chord tones, you know, like kind of like voice leading it a little bit. I'm playing, for the first chord, the D minor 7. I'm doing a bunch of D minor 7 arpeggios. You know, a bunch of D minor 7 arpeggios, but what I'm doing to give it some flavor is I'm mixing in some just notes from the D minor scale. And D minor pentatonic. Maybe a little bit of even blues. And what's happening is, instead of just, you know, if you just play those over it, it's going to kind of sound like shit, because I mean that's just kind of the way it is. What you gotta do to make it all sound good and come together is you gotta focus mostly on the arpeggios, the D minor 7 arpeggios for the first chord. You know, let me see. You know, just like all those, you should, you know, if you don't know them, you can look them up. You can figure that out, watch a different video on like how to do that. But yeah, if you already know that, that's great, because that'll make this a lot easier. You know, do your D minor 7 arpeggios, D minor arpeggios, D9 arpeggios, whatever kind of arpeggios work in the key of C major for this progression, that it doesn't conflict or have any avoid notes or things like that. And so basically, what you're going to do is, I'm sorry if I keep repeating the same stuff. I've never even done any video-like lesson things. But yeah, basically, first chord, arpeggios, D minor 7 arpeggios, bebop minor, mixing some notes from that, you know. Whatever, mixing some notes from that, but mainly focus on the arpeggios so that it sounds like you're following the chords, you know. And like if you're gonna mix in some of the minor, D minor scale with some arpeggios, you know, like. You know, like just stay mainly on the arpeggios, but you can just throw in whatever, anything that works with that chord, because that's what you're doing is you're isolating each chord and getting separate ideas for each one. Alright, and so yeah, that's what you're going to do for your first chord, you know, just all that bebop minor, you know, D minor pentatonic, D minor, or D blues, whatever, and just mix in your, just stay mainly focused on the arpeggios though. Mainly focus on the arpeggios and just throw in some more notes, you know, chromatic notes on top of them and stuff like that, you know, go into a note of the arpeggio with a chromatic note, like, or whatever. I'm kind of messed up, but yeah, you know, next chord. Right, so that's what you're going to do over the 2 chord. What you're going to do over the 5 chord is you're just going to basically do the same thing, except with different notes. You're going to follow the G dominant arpeggios and whatever other arpeggios work with that over that chord, or whatever. Yeah, all the arpeggios of that work with that chord and the progression as a whole, the key. You know, take G7 dominant arpeggio. So. Take notes from the frickin', yeah, G dominant arpeggio, and then mix in some bebop dominant, which is just a regular bebop scale. So, you know, mixing some notes from that. I'm not super pro at the dominant chord that much yet, so you know what I usually do is I just play bebop dominant and G7 dominant arpeggios and just mix them together, focusing mainly on the arpeggios. And for the last chord, the interesting thing about this is everything kind of gets kind of weirded out at this point, because you can do a basically over this one you have to do C major. So let's see, for the C major 7 chord, which is the, you know, root chord, you know, whatever, the, I don't know what you want to call it, but for this you're going to do there's a bunch of options. You can do C major, C major pentatonic, C major 7 arpeggios, C major arpeggios, probably C11 arpeggios, some sus arpeggios, you know, any arpeggio that works in the key, any chord, you know, and like, let's say this was just a regular, not jazz, C major progression, you know, any extension chord. But yeah, like I was saying, like imagine it's like any other like extension or whatever, like any extension you can do in the key in C major that works with like the thing as a whole, you know, you can do the arpeggios for that over this chord. But the thing that makes it kind of trippy is instead of just like being able to do like the other two, instead of just like doing what you're going to do over the 2 chord and what you're going to do over the 5 chord and what you're going to do over the 1 chord, though applies to like the thing as a whole. I mean, it might be a little less jazzy, but anything you can play over the C major 7 is playable over the 2 and the 5, which are the first 2 chords that I've been talking about this whole other time. But yeah, So basically, like, a thing that makes this a lot like easier to understand and might like make it seem a little less tedious in your head is draw out a chart. Let me show you this. Draw like a cute little chart like this basically. And what this is this isn't everything that you can do for each chord, but it's a good amount of stuff you can do. Like the first chord right here, you've got D minor 7, and it says arpeggio and bebop. So basically what this is the yellow squares, the highlighted notes, that's representing the arpeggios for that chord, which is, in this case, a D minor 7 arpeggio. And the chords in between that aren't highlighted are the notes of the bebop minor scale. And so yeah, for the next one, you know, you got your dominant 7 arpeggios and your dominant bebop in between. And on this one, that's where things get trippy. The red dots represents the arpeggios from the 2 chord, and the blue dots represents the arpeggios from the 5 chord. The yellow squares in this one are just major 7. It's the C major 7 arpeggio, and the notes in between are the bebop major. It's the bebop major notes. And the reason I put in the red and blue dots in this one is because if you wanted to just keep doing the major bebop over the whole thing, like over these 2 chords, you wouldn't have to like look back to know where the arpeggios were for these, because even though you're over here and you're doing the major bebop, you can't just do the, it's going to sound funny if you do the C major arpeggios over the 2 and the 5. So this lets you do the major bebop and be able to see where the arpeggios for the first and second chords are in the progression. But yeah, like, yeah, if you're playing the C major 7, wait, no, if you're just playing C major, the C major scale, and you keep playing it after this is done, you can go over, yeah, 2 and 5, you know, keep doing C major scale. But what you're going to want to do while you're doing that, while you're doing the C major bebop or the C major scale, C major pentatonic or whatever, when you're doing it over these 2, you still have to follow the arpeggios, but it won't be in this fashion or this fashion. It'll be in this fashion if you're doing this over these 2, if that makes any sense. You know, if you're doing this over the 2 chord and 5 chord, you're going to be mainly following the red dots for the 2 chord, and for the 5 chord mainly the blue dots. But then for everything else, you know, just messing around with the other notes that you have as an option. But yeah, that's not as standard as a jazz thing to do though. But yeah. And last but not least, another trippy thing that you might want to know of. Jazz progressions aren't always going to be 2-5-1. So you might be thinking, oh, I know what to do for this. You know, I know what to do for this. And then you're going to be like, oh, I know what to do for that. And you're like, oh, I know what to do for that, because that's the same fucking chord, you know. It's D major 7. This is, I'm actually not sure. Or it's C something, you know, C major 7 to C something. It's just another extension, so it's going to be the same. You're going to treat it the same way as any other 1 chord, but then it's going to go to a 4 chord in some situations, or maybe even another chord. And for this, you may be thinking, oh, what do I do? What is this? This is F major 7, which is, yeah, the 4th chord in the key of C. And so, yeah, that's a major chord, so you're going to treat it in a major fashion, just like you treat the 1 chord. The properties are a little different, but yeah, you can treat it like you would treat the 2 and the 5 whilst playing how you would play over the C, you know, doing your, you can keep doing C major over it, C pentatonic, you do C major bebop, or wait, maybe. You might be able to do C major bebop over this, but I'm pretty sure F major bebop will work over it. But as always, you're going to be sticking to the arpeggios of it, so you gotta get some F major arpeggios, F major 7 arpeggios, whatever. And you're going to treat it the same fashion as you'd treat a lot of the other chords. And you probably actually can't even see that. There you have it. So yeah, my first half-ass lesson